In this lecture, we're going to install Flutter and all other extra tools that are required in order to build mobile apps with Flutter on Windows. If you're not on a Windows device, you can skip this lecture. macOS is covered in the next lecture. So now to install Flutter on Windows, you should visit flutter.dev, the official Flutter website, and there click on Get Started. This takes you to the official Flutter documentation and there to the setup page. And there you can pick the operating system on which you are to find detailed instructions that tell you what to install on your system in order to use Flutter on it. Now here, since this lecture is about the setup on Windows, we are of course going to take Windows as an option, but it's important to understand that on this page you're not picking the platform for which you want to develop, but the platform on which you develop. So here you don't pick macOS just because you want to build a macOS app with Flutter, but instead you pick Windows because you are on a Windows system and you want to use Flutter on that. Then on this next page, you find detailed setup instructions, and I strongly recommend going through these instructions in addition to this video, since these instructions will always be 100% up to date. Sometimes some extra steps can be added, so you should always check out this page in addition to the video. And on this page, you also get direct links to all the tools you need to download, so therefore this is definitely a must-visit page. Now, when installing Flutter for Windows, there are some prerequisites. For example, you must install Git, as mentioned in the previous lecture. For that, you can simply follow this link on this page here, which takes you to the official Git website, and there pick the Git version for your Windows system version, and open that installer, which is downloaded here. This will now walk you through the Git installation process, and in general, you can accept all the defaults here and just walk through these different steps. But there's one setting you should override, and that is that you choose Use Git and optional Unix tools from command prompt if it's not the default for you already. You should select this option, as also explained in the official Flutter documentation. Now with that, you can continue through the remaining steps and confirm all the defaults there, no changes needed. And yes, there are quite a bit of steps, but once you're done, this will install this Git tool on your system, and installing this, as mentioned, is a prerequisite to then install and use Flutter. So once that's done, you can finish this step and go back to the official setup instructions. And now it's time to really install Flutter itself. For that, you should download that latest version using that link in the official documentation. And then, once this was downloaded, open this zip file that was fetched here and extract it. And in that file, you will find a Flutter folder. Now that Flutter folder must be moved somewhere else. And it's generally up to you where you want to move this, though the official documentation recommends picking a path like this. So here I'll go to my C drive, create a new folder there, which I will name SRC, and paste that Flutter folder from that zip file into this folder, so into this SRC folder, which again can take some time because it is rather big and there are a couple of files to be moved and copied. And once copying this extracted Flutter folder to this source folder here, in my case finished, you're ready to continue with the next steps. By the way, keep these warnings in mind when picking a location for your Flutter folder on your system. So to continue with the next steps, you must update your path, which in the end means you must make your operating system, or specifically the command prompt on Windows, aware of these extra Flutter tools which you did now install, because it turns out that this Flutter folder which you just copied contains a bunch of tools that will be needed later on. Now, to make your system aware of these extra tools, you should search for env in your system search to edit your system environment variables. Alternatively, you can manually go there through the control panel. So here on this page, you should edit your environment variables, and then there your user variables for your user. Now there you should typically already have a path variable, so a variable called path, but if you don't have it, simply create it. Now I do have it, so instead of creating it, I'll select it and click Edit. And here you now must add a new entry, a new value to that variable. And the value that should be added here should be the path to the bin folder in that Flutter folder you just copied around. So in my case, it's this path, or to be precise, this path, which then includes /bin at the end. So you should copy this path to this bin folder in that Flutter folder and insert this as a new value into this path environment variable. And then click OK and OK. Now with that done, you can continue further down to the next step and run Flutter Doctor in your command prompt to verify that Flutter was installed correctly. So for this, open your default command prompt, which is pre-installed on your system, and in there, run Flutter Doctor. Now, if you get an error that the Flutter command can't be found, you should revisit this step where the path was updated, because something went wrong there. It should find the Flutter command if you did update the path correctly. So make sure you did enter the right path in the right environment variable if this Flutter Doctor command fails. Otherwise, this command should work and should give you some output that looks something like this. Now, you might still get some errors in there, and that's totally fine, but it should find the Flutter tool on your system. It should generally work. Now, one of the errors we're getting here is that it can't find the Android toolchain. So the tools required to develop Android apps are not installed on this system yet. And that indeed is the case. We haven't done that yet. So that's indeed what we'll do next. Now that Flutter was installed and this Flutter command works, you should move on to the Android setup to prepare your system for Android app development with Flutter. And that all starts with downloading Android Studio, which is Google's official Android development environment, which includes a bunch of tools that will be used under the hood by Flutter. So on this page, you should download Android Studio, and for that, of course, accept all these license agreements and then start the download. And this is also a rather big file, so downloading this can take a couple of seconds or even minutes. And once the download finished, you should open this downloaded Android Studio installer. So with that installer started, you can and should accept all these default values, especially make sure that the Android virtual device will be installed so that you can start such a Android emulator later on. I do recommend that you keep the default installation location to ensure that everything works smoothly later on, and then continue with the remaining steps and finish that installation process. Again, this might take a couple of seconds or minutes, of course. Now, once this finished, you should also immediately start Android Studio, and this will open up a configuration wizard since you're starting this for the first time. Now, in that wizard, you should choose custom options here. Confirm the default location though. You can pick any color theme of your choice. We won't use Android Studio for writing code in this course anyways, so it doesn't matter too much. But you should make sure that you do check Android SDK here, that you do also pick an Android SDK platform here, and Android virtual device. Now in my case, I can't confirm the default folder which it would like to use for downloading and storing these SDK files, since I have a special character in my user folder path, and hence I'll pick a different path here. Which you of course might not need to do. And with that you can continue, accept these license agreements, and finish the setup process. So once done, you can finish this setup wizard, and a new window should open where you should select SDK Manager by clicking on More Actions, SDK Manager. And here you should for one make sure that you do check that latest stable Android version here under SDK Platforms. And under SDK Tools, you should select the SDK Build Tools and make sure that you also got the SDK Platform Tools selected here. In addition, the Android SDK command line tools should also be selected. And once you did all of that, you should press Apply to make sure that these extra tools will be installed. Again, you will need to confirm some license agreements and walk through these remaining installation steps, which again can take a couple of minutes. Once this is finished, you have all the software installed that must be installed in order to build Android apps with Flutter. But now you should again go to More Actions here and go to Virtual Device Manager. And here click on Create Device. This wizard allows you to create a new virtual device blueprint, and the idea behind virtual devices simply is that you have an Android device emulator running on your system to conveniently preview your Flutter app whilst you're working on the code. So here you can pick any template of your choice, like Pixel 6 in my case, click Next, download the latest Android version here, which again can take a short while. And then once that was done, finish this, click Next again, and on this page under Emulated Performance, pick Hardware if possible. And then click Finish. With that, you got a virtual device blueprint, and you can now start the actual emulator by clicking on this play button here. And this will start the emulator on your system, and you can restart this whenever you want to have such an emulator up and running again. You can close it when you're done for the day, when you're done writing your Flutter code, and you can restart it through that virtual device manager whenever you need that virtual device again. Though I will also soon show you an alternative, even more convenient way of starting that emulator. But you always must create such a blueprint, which we did do now. And with that, we finished all these setup steps. You can also run your Flutter apps on a real device, but I will come back to this part here later in the course. For the moment, we just need this emulator, which we did now set up as described here in the official docs. And with that, you got everything you need to build mobile apps with Flutter. As mentioned multiple times, we can't build iOS apps on Windows, which is why we won't add any setup for that here, but we got everything we need to build Android apps. Now, what's really important, if you get stuck at any point or if you're facing any problems, use that official documentation. And of course, you don't need to go through all these steps again and again every time you dive back into development. You only need to do this once. From now on, you can create new Flutter projects and work on these projects without going through all these steps again and again.